So we're going to do Revelation Intro Part 2. Now last week we talked about how it's the book of Revelation, not revelations. Not a bunch of it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. It is a picture of who He is and His victory over sin. His ultimate victory and His return to this earth. It's a picture of a new heaven and a new earth. But it's all a revelation of who Jesus is. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. And we talked a little bit about is it symbolic or is it literal? How do we interpret it? And this is a tough thing because some people interpret it very symbolically. Some people interpret it very literally. But at the end of the day, we have to tell ourselves, what does this show us about who Jesus is? So, in Revelation 1:1 it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ. That's what this book is about. Which God gave to Him. In other words, God gave this revelation to Jesus to show His servants. So it says, which God gave to Him to show His servants. So you can see two distinct entities here. The Father and the Son. God gave to Him. The Father gave to the Son to show His servants. Things which must shortly take place. And He sent and signified, and that Greek is semeno, I think is how you say it, semeno, something like that. And signified it by His angel to His servant John. So, it was from God to Christ to the angels and then to John. So this is a picture that was given to Christ, who gave it to the angels, who then passed it on to John. The word semeno means communicated or made known. It's used in the New Testament as communicated by signs. And it's used to describe the miracles of Jesus as a proof of who He was. So, He's communicating a message in the book of Revelation through signs very similar to the Old Testament prophets. And much of Revelation has to be interpreted through those pictures and similar pictures that we find in the Old Testament. The book of Revelation is a prophecy and an epistle. It was written to the churches. It was written to believers as a letter. And yet it is also a prophecy. You can see the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to Him to show His servants things which must shortly take place, and He sent and signified it by His angel to His servant John. In Daniel 2:28 it says, he says, after King Nebuchadnezzar had his dream, he says, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. And He has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. Okay? So, we have four critical elements here in that very first verse. And I'm not even going over the first verse. I'm just trying to give you an introduction into how we're going to look at Revelation. There's four main things. A revelation, God showed, concerning what will come to pass, and He signified it. So in this first one, there's the revelation, which God gave to show His servants. A revelation God showed concerning what will come to pass, things which must shortly take place, and He signified it. And He sent and signified it. So you've got those four things that happen, and you have them also in Daniel 2:28 as well as Daniel 2:45. Exact same four elements. And those four elements only show up in Revelation and Daniel. Exactly like that. John deliberately uses the language of signify from Daniel 2:45 in part to portray that what God has been showing him is likewise symbolic. So all of these are symbols and signs. And you have to be careful about making them very literal. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. But you have to remember, they mean something. They're symbolic of something. So you just have to be careful how you interpret it. Most of the things that are about to unfold are not to be taken literally. Lions, lambs, beasts, women, etc. But each refers symbolically to another reality or set of realities. Daniel 2:45 says, "Inasmuch as you saw the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure." So, when Nebuchadnezzar had that dream, do you remember that? Have you all heard of that dream where there was a statue with the head of gold, and the bronze, and the silver, and the iron, and a rock comes and smashes it? Well, that didn't actually happen. There was no great statue that was there. It was a picture of something that was to come, right? That wasn't a literal statue. It was a symbol of something that was going to happen. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it was a dream or vision that the king had. He saw a huge statue. It was made of 4 sections: head of gold, body of silver, waist of bronze, legs of iron, and the feet had clay mixed in. The statue is smashed by a rock. The rock grows, fills the earth. Daniel tells the king that this vision was symbolic. It was showing him something that was going to happen in the future. Not that actual vision that he had, but that was symbolic. The statue was symbolic of 4 kingdoms: Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, and Rome. We know that now because we can look back and see the interpretation of that. The stone represented God's kingdom. His kingdom would defeat the evil kingdoms of the world and dominate the world. The interpretation of the dream shows that the dream is not to be taken literally in terms of a statue and its various parts, but rather that the statue signifies or symbolizes something else. And that's how we're going to look at the book of Revelation. We're going to look at all of these things that it's talking about, and we don't want to take them and try to apply them to what's going on. Like, for a long time they thought the Antichrist was Hitler, okay? Then they thought Saddam Hussein could be the Antichrist. And so the minute that you try to start applying that, it's bigger than that. Okay, you can get off a little bit. So we want to take Revelation and look at it for what it is, which is a revelation of Jesus Christ. So we see that John deliberately uses the language of signify from Daniel verses chapter 2 verse 45, that what God has been showing him is also symbolic. Most of the things that are about to unfold are not to be taken literally. They were pictures of something that was going to happen. So it's very popular to interpret literally unless forced to interpret symbolically. In other words, many of the books that you read on Revelation, has anybody read a book on Revelation here? Hal Lindsey, they're great books, don't get me wrong. Hal Lindsey, Grant Jeffries, oh my gosh, there's tons of them. John Hagee, you name it. But it's very popular to try and put current events into the things that are happening in Revelation. The problem with that is once that doesn't fit anymore, they have to change it again. And so we have to be careful about that. So they usually interpret literally instead of symbolically. And we need to interpret symbolically unless forced to interpret literally. And what do I mean by that? Most of the things are to be taken symbolically. The lion, the lamb, the beast, the woman. These each refer symbolically to another reality or set of realities. Now we're going to talk about that as we go through the book of Revelation. Because some things we know what the symbols mean. But some things we don't know. Okay? We want to make sure we know that this is a symbol of whatever. Revelation, at least outside the letters to the 7 churches in chapters 2 and 3, is a series of revelatory visions which are to be interpreted symbolically, unless there's a strong evidence in the text to the contrary. The visions, i.e. the beast, the false prophet, the 7 kings, the 10 horns, the army of 200 million, the 24 elders, the millennium, are for the most part to be taken non-literally. This does not mean that they have no meaning or historical reference, but that the meaning is to be found symbolically and almost always within the context of Old Testament references. John wrote that he knew the Old Testament very well, and this was revealed to him. And honestly, Revelation is more than just an inspired book. It was actually a revelation. So we have to take it in light of the Old Testament. What does it symbolize? We must determine what something symbolizes. For example, the woman on the beast in chapter 17. Is she the world system? Is she the Catholic Church? Remember how that teaching was going around that, oh, that's the Catholic Church? Now, you know what the big thing is? Muslim religion. That's the Muslim religion. So the Catholics are safe now. They weren't 20 years ago, but now they're sort of fading out, and it's the Muslim religion. So you can see how just times change, and new book. It's great for writing books because then you don't, you can write a new book and give a whole different interpretation. What about the fire from the 2 faithful witnesses' mouth that devours their enemy? Are they human flamethrowers? Did they actually spit out fire and consume them? No, that's a picture of something. That's a symbolic of something. Is it what they say? Is it a message of judgment or literal fire? We have to ask those questions as we go through the book of Revelation. So we have to be very careful. We can't just pick and choose this is literal and this is symbolic. We have to look at everything as being symbolic unless we're forced to make it literal. Sometimes we're given the interpretation. In the case of the 7 lampstands, the scripture tells us they represent the 7 churches. The 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. And the 7 angels are the pastors of those churches. So it interprets itself. And that's what we have to do with all of these pictures. Is this in Scripture somewhere else? Does this tell us what this is somewhere else in Scripture? And that's what we're going to look at. Okay? We're not going to look at current events and try and fit a scripture into a current event. That's not a very good way to interpret Revelation. Numbers in Revelation. There's lots of numbers in Revelation, and lots of numbers that you're very familiar with in the Bible. But 4, 7, and 12, and their multiples, are mentioned repeatedly in the book of Revelation. The number 4 symbolizes all-encompassing, okay, like the 4 winds, the 4 corners of the earth, the 4 rivers of Eden. There are 4 gospel accounts. Ezekiel saw 4 living creatures by the throne. This is a picture that you see in Scripture all the time. And yes, there probably were 4 rivers in Eden. The 4 corners of the earth. That we know the earth is round. The 4 corners of the earth means the whole earth. Okay? The 4 winds. The winds don't just blow from 4 different directions. They blow from all different directions, but it means all the wind. All of the wind. The number 7 symbolizes completeness. It's used 735 times in the Bible, 54 times in the book of Revelation alone. There are 7 notes in a musical scale, 7 days in a week, 7 churches, 7 angels to the 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 plagues, 7 thunders, and 7 last plagues. So, and there's more than that. It's just, 7 is just everywhere. It's all over Scripture. 735 times the number 7, which is the number of completeness. The number 12 symbolizes perfection and completeness. Perfect government, completeness of Israel. 12 can be found in 187 places in the Bible. Revelation alone has 22 occurrences. Jacob had 12 sons. Jesus had 12 disciples. Ishmael had 12 princes. There's a lot of scripture on 12. I will tell you another number too, is 10. 10 is the number of the law. There were 10 commandments. Whenever you see the word 10, just always think, ooh, this kind of represents law. This represents Old Covenant. This represents law. The symbolic use of numbers serves to... servers. See, I was thinking work. Serves to express God's sovereignty over all time and all things. Okay, why symbols? Why is Revelation so hard to understand? Why all these symbols? What's going on? And is this book even relevant for Christians today? I can tell you it was relevant for Christians back in John's day. And it's just as relevant for us. There's so much insight and wealth in this book. And you're just going to see so many amazing things. And not only that, we're going to read through it. When we start going verse by verse, we're going to read through it because there's a blessing on everybody who reads those words. And the connotation is to read them aloud. So we're going to read it aloud as we go through. But why symbols? It's similar to the prophets in the Old Testament. Very similar. It's similar to the parables of Jesus. Jesus used a lot of parables to teach truth. He who has an ear, let him hear. You hear that in Revelation when he's talking to the 7 churches. You have to have discernment and wisdom to understand what's going on here. Signs either harden the heart or soften the heart. They'll either make somebody hard, like Pharaoh, like the signs of Egypt, or they will soften the heart and you'll go, oh my gosh, I believe this. I don't totally understand it, but it'll either soften your heart or harden your heart. So, what did Jesus say? You're neither hot nor cold. He wants you hot or cold, one or the other, not in the middle. And that's what this will do. So, some are saved when they read the message of Revelation. Some are in disbelief. Some are confused. But you can be sure that these signs and symbols will one day be understood completely. We don't know for sure. We can speculate, but the Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 13:12, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I am also known. So, that is Introduction to Revelation Part 2. We're going to be looking at symbols, a lot of them, a lot of signs, and we want to be careful about what we attribute those signs to. It's trying to teach us a spiritual truth, and ultimately, it's the Christian is victorious over the enemy. We're overcomers, and that is the true message of Revelation. Okay, any questions, comments?
A lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff. When we start going verse by verse, I'm really going to open it up to chat because there's just so much in there, and it is kind of fun to look at these. We're going to go through the scripture, we're going to get the Old Testament references, and then we're going to talk about it. And it doesn't hurt to say, well, you know what, that could represent, what did they used to say? The European Union, okay? When it was 10 horns, and then one horn was broken and 3 horns came out of it. Oh, that's the European Union, and look, one just fell away, and now there's 3 more. Well, you know, when it starts getting more than that, then they're like, well, maybe that wasn't the European Union. Did you ever hear that? Man, I was big into prophecy years and years ago, and I studied Revelation so much, and I read all the books. And back then it was the Catholic Church, the European Union, and they were like applying all of these things that are no longer relevant today.
88 reasons why Jesus is coming back in 88.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.